Hi everybody and welcome to the video and live streaming show. My name's John Lacey and as always I'm joined by Sam Proof, and I forgot to do one little thing, so let me do that rather quickly. But welcome to the show. Today we're going to be talking all about designing and building a live stream show in OBS Studio and with the use of some other software as well. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. Before we get there, though, we are going out live to all the various places, and I'm forever trying to make this thing happen. But hashtag Team Live if you're watching live, or you can do hashtag Team Replay in the comments afterwards if you're not watching live. But Sam, a few things have happened during the week. I guess the first one, we'll get the most upsetting one potentially out of the way first. This TikTok ban for America is looking increasingly likely. So how are you feeling about that one?
Yeah, they lost their appeal in the DC court, and I don't know that they have any further steps to appeal at this point. That might be it. It might be a done deal come early January. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I never got super big on TikTok. It is definitely a part of our content strategy for both myself and Cute Avalanche, but it's not a monetized form of our content, and it's not a super large community. There's a few thousand people on either account, which hopefully we can manage to move them over, but I'm not stressed about it. For the most part, I've cross posted most of my content. If it goes on TikTok, it also goes on either YouTube and or Instagram, so it's out there already. But I do know a lot of people who create videos straight to TikTok that are starting to try and figure out how to make that move. And there, I've been looking around. There are a lot of free or cheap software apps that you can get to download your videos quickly. The one thing I've noticed is, for the most part, I have not found any that that save your caption, your title somewhere easily, like the file name. But I guess the file name would be not long enough character-wise. So I think that's the biggest trick for a lot of creators, is figuring that workflow out if they need to do that. And I'm going to look into it, but if somebody's found something, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. And it's interesting. I'm like, TikTok is such a guilty pleasure for me, just randomly scrolling, but I don't really put a lot of content up there either. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And, I guess they're still proposing that maybe they can sell to an American organization. I don't know if that's likely to happen. But I guess it's an interesting time, and I guess we can watch that space.
Yeah, from what I heard the first go around, they were not interested in that option whatsoever. And they were like, we'll burn the ship down before we sell it. So I don't know. I mean, at the same time, ByteDance has another app that is essentially the same app. It just doesn't have quite as many bells and whistles, or the CapCut integration, or the Effect House integration. And what is it? It's Lemon 8. So maybe they'll just be like, yeah, that's it. That's the thing, until somebody bans that. I didn't really think about the Effect House thing, which I had a lot of fun making TikTok effects. And I guess that's just something I can't transfer, because it's a different software for Snapchat effects or filters. And I don't even know if any of the other apps have that, but that's an unfortunate loss. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. And hello to, say, the facilitator who's watching from Germany. Great to have your company today. I guess the other thing too, we might, I feel like we could do an entire hour on this, but just really briefly, our good friend Garen Belaney kind of posted something on LinkedIn, an opportunity, and I don't know if this was something he was personally offered or if this is just something that he's seen on social media. Maybe we could ask him about that at another time. But essentially, the idea was that you would be hired to live stream for 8 hours a day, every day for 3 months at $500 a day, which I think worked out at $60 odd an hour. And I'm really curious how you feel about that, because for me, and I guess we'll talk about this on today's show as well, but for me, I come in, I want to do structured content for a short period of time. I don't want to be here for 8 hours. And I think the thing that I kind of said to him was that if I could split duties with somebody and maybe do 4 hours a day, that could be quite doable for me. But I can't imagine a parallel universe where I would want to be in front of the camera for 8 hours a day every day. I'm curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, 8 hours is a lot to do anything. I mean, it sounds like, oh, you're just sitting there, but man, it's so much energy to do this kind of thing. And even for the 1 hour that we do it, like afterward, you take your headphones off and you go sit down and you're like, I'm good. That's fine. I'm done with that. Like it, I've seen this kind of post on Twitter time and time again, which I think is really just an engagement tactic. And I don't know if there is an actual company behind it, giving Garen an offer or putting an offer out there. I'd love to hear more details, but I think really the thing that it comes down to is like, what are the demands of those 8 hours? Like, you know, what is the content? How polished does it have to be? And how much prep time do you have to have for this? How much time away from the camera can it be like, all right, that's 2 hours, I'm going to step away for half an hour, come back, and we'll continue? Like, what are the constructs there? I can easily run Qt Avalanche 24/7, and that doesn't do anything. You want to put an ad up there, pay me for that, great, fine. If I have to be performing or worse, selling something for 8 hours, that's a lot. It's really just a lot.
And I think this discussion actually ties in really well with today's topic, because especially on a place like TikTok, which I think is generally where Garen is doing his thing, like it's very common for live streams to just be literally somebody going about their day and saying hello when they see somebody enter the chat. And like there's nothing more elaborate than that. And I guess as a bit of social interaction, that's fine. But for me personally, I kind of want to actually teach you something, or have an in-depth discussion for a shorter period of time, rather than just sort of be available all the time. So let's talk about actually creating and designing a new show. And I must admit, the people in the audience are going to be learning about this in real time as much as Sam is today, because I haven't sort of clued him into anything that I'm sort of planning for next year. For me personally. So I do have a very specific example I want to work with, but I think it's important that we think about maybe the difference between just the spontaneous live stream, which can be just you on camera and whatever you feel like doing and sharing, and maybe just literally chatting with people that jump in, and maybe an actual show that has a focus and a subject and potentially different segments. And again, I'm a bit of a control freak, so I try to run this show as, in a very particular way, and I have specific segments and different ways of actually working. But I'm curious, Sam, because I know you've done versions of both over the years. So how do you think about maybe those different types of content and when you might want to do one over the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty apparent based on what it is you want to do. Like the minute you sit down and go, I'm going to do this show every Friday at 3 p.m., you're doing a structured show. You're going to do something that has more demands to it. And if you're just going to be like, I'm just going to randomly go live from time to time again, then that's what that is. It's an informal stream. So really you just need the basics and whatever is fun. Like, it's like those kind of streams, you start with the basics, you have a full screen, and if you have other needs, you build out those needs, a starting screen, an end screen, if you're doing games, a game screen, whatever. And then just as time goes on, you go, oh, it'd be nice if I had a picture in a picture. Oh, it'd be nice if I had a circular mask around my camera. It's one of those kind of things. But when you go to build like a show, right, that has different segments, like I typically go way too overboard, create, an independent like style guide for that show. I research the different fonts and colors I want to use.
Okay, I think we've lost Sam there for a moment, but hopefully he'll be back in a second. But essentially, I think those are good points that Sam was sort of making. So essentially the ability to have those different scenes. And we will sort of come back and talk about that in more detail. I guess the plan I have for today's show is talk about one of the projects that I'm sort of hoping to kick off in 2025. Talk about the designing some elements for that in Affinity Designer specifically, which is software I'm pretty new to. So it'll be fun to see how that goes. But and then thinking about how we can export some of those graphics, how you might want to actually work in different layers, because the beautiful thing about OBS in particular is that we do have that layer structure, so you can put things in front of other things. Again, in some ways, that capability is extended by the fact that I live in front of my green screen 24/7. That may work a little bit differently for you if you have just a normal stage set piece. So we're going to talk about those. And I think what I'll do is I'll throw to a promo. We'll come back and we'll talk about some of the branding and design elements that we can incorporate into our show.
We are constantly training our cats every interaction that we have with them. So when Johan would get on my counter before, this is 10 years ago, before I was the cat expert that I am now, Johan would jump on the counter. What was the first thing I did? I'd say his name, Johan. He loves that. That's a reward for him. He said, you just said my name. I would go over to him and I'd talk to him and be like, you can't be on the counter. Johan loves when I talk to him. Ding, that's another reward for Johan. I'd pick him up and put him on the ground, but I didn't want him to think I was mad at him. So when I'd pick him up very nicely and kiss him on the head and say, I love you, but you can't be here. I'd put him on the ground. I had just done 3 things that rewarded him for being on the counter. So I was encouraging him to continue doing that.
And that's a podcast promo for Sam's podcast, Just Kidding Around, which you can learn more about over at cuteavalanche.com. This is the video and live streaming show. Today on the show, we're talking all about how we can design and build out a new show in OBS Studio using some other software. And Sam is literally restarting his computer, so hopefully he'll be back in a second. But you've just got me to wrangle with at the moment, so that's fine. So what I want to do, and I don't know how many people are aware of this, but in 2025, I kind of really want to do a lot more OBS Studio specific content. And we have done a fair bit on this show, but I kind of wanted to do my own thing as well. So I've got this idea for a show called OBS Obsessed, which I've been designing some elements for. And this is kind of an idea I've had for a really long time, and I just haven't been able to bring it together in the way that I wanted to. And if you are new to this show, you may not know, but over the Black Friday period, I sort of purchased the Affinity suite of apps, and that includes Designer, Publisher, and one other, which I think is Designer Photo, Affinity Photo from memory. Okay, so Sam is apparently back in the waiting room, so let me just bring him in. I'm hoping this will still be the same thing, but I can't quite see you just yet, Sam. Just try again and let me know when you are. There we go. I think I'm seeing something now. Currently on mute, but that's okay. We'll come back to you when you're ready. But essentially, I've purchased these new apps. There he is. Let me just see if I can bring him back. Hello, Sam. Welcome back.
Hey, sorry about that.
That's okay. All right, so we've got the computer restarted. So I was just explaining to everybody, one of my goals for 2025 is to actually start a new show about OBS Studio specifically, and I've decided to call it OBS Obsessed because I just thought that was, that was a fun thing that we could do. And the other thing too is that I've just been, I purchased the Affinity apps over the Black Friday period, so I'm playing with those. And essentially, and if I press this magical button, we'll find out if this works in real time or not. But there we go. Okay, so we can screen share, and I can actually see Sam there as well. So awesome. So what I've been doing essentially, and this is just in Affinity Designer, which is basically their version of Illustrator. So it is predominantly vector, but you can sort of get some other things involved there as well. And I've kind of just sort of designed a few different elements here. And I've got different artboards. And I guess the first thing that's really important is if you're designing something for a specific dimension, make sure you use those here. So if I go to the document setup, essentially the other thing that was really important too was just making sure that I actually had a transparent background, because I didn't know how to do that initially, so that was an important thing to do. But essentially, I've just got these 1920 by 1080, and again, it could be that you're actually designing something in it for a vertical format, in which case you just flip those numbers around. And again, if you're going to larger dimensions, you could play around with that as well. So I guess what I probably want to do, and again, this is kind of the point at which I have to admit I'm still learning this software, but I've basically got different artboards that I'm designing with, and this is just sort of like a standard one. The idea here is it would just be me in the frame. I probably wouldn't actually wear this black shirt on this black background. That's probably a mistake, but for our purposes today, that's how I'm going to roll. But essentially, I've treated some text. I've got an outline here. I've also got a number of different shapes, some of which have actually been cut out of other shapes because I want to actually do some stacking in OBS. So I guess, Sam, like, you know, we probably need to have a bit of a conversation about branding more generally, like, you know, in terms of, and I pressed the wrong button there. There we go. That's how that should work in future. But essentially, how do you think about, you know, choosing colors and fonts and branding that should hopefully appeal to your target audience?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can do an endless amount of research. At some point, you just kind of have to like decide for yourself what feels good. But like, there are, you know, some pre-created psychological theories about color that you can Google really quickly. You can even just compare to brands that are similar or within the same niche and kind of see what other people are doing and be like, oh, everyone's using this font or everyone's doing this, or just, you know, finding things that are like one or two steps over, like, you know, maybe I know I'm creating a show based around live streaming, but a lot of podcasters are going to be potentially my audience. So what do those, you know, videos that they look like, and then use those as inspiration. But in general, I like a lot of thick, bold fonts, no serifs, no sans serifs. So things that you can reduce to a very small size and still be able to read well. And color wise, I try not to go too contrasty. I don't want to like hurt anybody's eyes. And I don't do a whole lot. There's a lot of brands that do like 5 shades of blue, and I'm like, I'm good with one, maybe two. And then 2 other complementary colors and things like that. So, you know, simple, but just it's good to have those things picked out. I do like the distinction of OBS in the Obsessed. I think that's a really great place to start with.
Yeah, I thought that would be fun, and I kind of mentioned while you were restarting that I had this idea for years, and I just haven't been able to figure it out. Because there's a part of me, and I'm not a gamer, I'm not a game streamer, and I kind of never will be. But there's a part of me that has always been really admiring of the neon lights and that kind of thing, and I thought this would be a great excuse to sort of implement some of that stuff. So
yeah,
and I guess what I've done here, and essentially go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that is a good inspiration for this particular thing, because I think that is a good cross section of who that audience might be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the big thing for me, and again, you can use whatever software you like. I know a lot of people love Canva. You know, people will be using Illustrator and Photoshop. That's fine. The thing that I would be looking for in terms of software for creating this kind of thing, and probably just doing designs generally, is just the ability to have different boards or pages so you can sort of try out different treatments. Because in some ways, like these 3 artboards that are on screen right now, and I've got to probably press this one here, but essentially these are really very similar things where all the stuff is identical. And I know you can't see a lot of that because of I've hidden different layers on different things, but the idea here essentially was I was going to have one version here with just myself as a direct camera, and again, I won't wear black because that'll be a problem. And I might even change some of these colors. So some of these things are subject to change. Okay, I kind of forgot that I set some things up in the Mix It Up chat bot. So some people are getting custom welcome messages. So that's fun.
Nice.
All right. So essentially, I've got these designs. The next one is actually kind of really just I wanted to make sure I had somewhere for the comments to go and maybe lower thirds if I decide to do that. And again, if we actually zoom in on this, I haven't done a particularly good job of this. You can see that doesn't line up at all. But I kind of decided to go in a different direction anyway. So I'll show you that in a second. But essentially, what we can do now is... this is the point at which I have to really just confess that I'm very new to this software and I don't even know how to zoom out. So I think Control minus probably. There we go. All right, brilliant. So essentially, I guess what I want to highlight here in particular is that there are a number of different things here, and a lot of these may not be super obvious to you. So I kind of want to unpack some of these things. So let's just make sure we're actually on Artboard 1. So that's this one here, this first one. So I can sort of hide things. So again, there's sort of a stand-in for my camera. I've got the OBS text, and again, that's actually text upon text, so it's been treated slightly differently to get that effect. The rest of the word obsessed is underneath it. I do have a rectangle, which is kind of mostly there just to give a background to the text itself. So I didn't want the lines sort of go underneath that. I think that would be a little bit too difficult to read. So we've got that in there as well. I've got this rounded rectangle. So this is actually the one with the gradient in it, which has that sort of purpley cyan neon color type thing happening there. I do also have a background which is literally just to fill in that space. And, you know, if we, and again, I might just toggle some of these things back on just as a reference, but essentially what I've done down here in Artboard 3 is I've made a copy of all of that, which I realize you can't see at the moment because I think I've turned off nearly all of it. But let me just find that from the list. Artboard 3 is just above it. So again, I can turn these things on, hopefully. I'm locking them instead of turning them on. Let me try that again. All right. So again, the OBS with the black backgrounds and the text is something that I've exported as its own thing. I've also got that, am I in the right one? I'm probably not. No. Okay. Let me keep going. So I've got the rectangle, the rounded rectangle. I really need, it's funny, I don't do too great with these dark interfaces, but anyway, let me just double check that I'm not in the right one. So there we go, up here. All right, let me turn these things on here. So again, this is kind of what I wanted to draw your attention to, because this is actually a cutout section. So this is going to go on top of me. So if I have something like a screen share or, you know, even just myself on camera here, I want to sort of make sure that it's within these bounds. So I did that as a bit of a cutout, and then I've also sort of exported, this is the problem with having so many things close together, but essentially I've got that as its own thing. So I guess the big thing for me is that I've been going in and sort of going to File and Export, and I've actually been exporting specific artboards. So I can do 1, 2, or 3. I've been making sure that I've got the transparency happening, which again was actually a setting that I needed to make sure was on at a document level. And I've just been exporting different parts of this as their own distinct elements. And I feel like I've been talking for a really long time, Sam, so maybe I'll let you jump in here. Yeah. Like, is this the, and I keep pressing the wrong button. There we go. That's new.
Yeah.
So I guess like...
yeah, no, I mean, that's... Yeah. Go on.
I might even go to Said's comment first, actually. So personally, I prefer creating assets outside of OBS and then adding them in, like frames and masks with drop shadows, instead of using plugins and filters in OBS to achieve the same. And that's a good point. And I guess up until quite recently, we haven't had the plugins to do things like create advanced masks and do outlines and glows and things. But we do have them now, and I guess that's a preference at the end of the day. But again, like Sam, if you were kind of building out something like this, how would you go about it? What kind of software would you be using, I guess, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally when I was doing like a show with basically a mortise, what you've created there, I was doing that in Photoshop, which I no longer have a license for. So I'd actually have to look around to see what I can get for free that would work on both PC and Mac. Since I have both of those, that would be able to do such a thing and go from there. I don't know offhand. But yeah, traditionally it would have been Photoshop and then, just move it into OBS that way. But now with all of the filters that and plugins that are out there, the nice thing about them is that you can create some really cool stuff in, any Photoshop type tool. But if you want it to have like any kind of motion to it, you're going to start to deal with, possible extra load on your computer or, OBS itself, or possible degradation of image and stuff like that. And that's where having be a filter or a plugin can actually be really nice. So depending on what I want to do with it, I might consider adding some of those elements as dynamic from within OBS itself.
Sure, and I guess you have those options these days. I guess the other thing for me too is, and again, this is sort of outside of the scope of what we're doing today, but a part of me was really keen to maybe see if I could do an animated version of this obsessed text in DaVinci Resolve and sort of export that as its own resource. I guess the other thing I wanted to mention too is when I am exporting exporting these artboards, I'm always exporting them in this size, 1920 by 1080, and they do have the transparency, which will be preserved. So the reason I personally do that is once I've designed them, I kind of just want them to be exactly where I put them and not move them again. That's not to say you couldn't just sort of like export the OBS obsessed sort of logo by itself and then potentially resize that or move it around in different places, but I just find that way easier.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it really does depend on the needs of the show. Like we have that interactive cat thing happening, Christmas thing happening over on the Cute Avalanche stream, and we did exactly that. We have 100 different animated, or not even animated, 100 different elements, and just they need to line up in specific places because you're turning them on and off, and there's like Christmas lights and tinsel and cat faces and stuff like that, and they need to be exactly where they need to be. So yes, we put them all into Photoshop and did a 1920 by 1080 document, and those individual elements, even though they're mostly transparent, that is what they are. So it's this little piece of a face, but it's got to be right here. So it is just a 1920 by 1080. But yeah, if you're doing something where you want to create something that moves around and whatever, that might not be what you need to do. So it depends on your wants. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess that's the thing. If you are going to, dramatically alter something, like if you're going to stretch it quite a bit, you really want to make sure you export it at a larger size. But as Sam sort of noted before, any extra load on your computer on OBS, you really need to make sure your computer can handle that. And that'll obviously vary for different people. So, just seeing what you can do. So what, and I've just, admittedly, I haven't worked on this nearly as much as I would like to have done, but I just want to show you how we can sort of build out some of this. And I realize we have some very sophisticated OBS people in the audience already, so they probably know a lot of this stuff. Hello to YMC, who says me too. He or she uses Photoshop and then loads it into OBS. Said writes, nice thing about OBS is if you overwrite an image on your PC, let's say an overlay, it will automatically update in OBS instantly. Super convenient.
Yeah. That's exactly how we do the ornament takeover on the Cute Avalanche Catmas experience. So when you drop 200 bits on Twitch, I have a little script that downloads that user avatar, and it replaces or it just renames that to image and then the current number. And there's a counter that tells it what the current number is. And it overwrites an image of an ornament with that user avatar. We also have like a circle mask inside OBS so that it is the right shape as well. But that's exactly what happens, and it happens automatically. So you don't even see it like blink off. It just changes.
Nice. Okay, cool. We're going to come back and I'll show you how we can bring some of those assets into OBS, and we'll look at how we can combine these things and have a bit of a play. So this is the video and live streaming show. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, I'm John Lacey, and in Build a Presentation Muscle, I want to talk about finding your voice, refining and sharing your message, using tools and technology to share that message, and looking after yourself as a creator.
And that's a podcast promo for my podcast, Build a Presentation Muscle, which you can learn more about over at johnlacey.com. I should probably press this magical button here so you can see that little banner on the screen. And I've moved my podcast to a new podcasting host, and I'm really eager to start recording episodes again. I know it's been a little while between episodes, but we'll try and fix that in the new year. So, all right, cool, Sam. So let's go to OBS and I guess just check this out. And I guess the thing I'll let everybody in the audience know is I'm running this second version of OBS because the magic is happening. Our show's magic is happening in one version, and this is sort of a second portable version. And if you do need to know how to run a second portable version, I do have an article about that over at johnlacey.com. But I guess the thing I really love about this is OBS has different profiles. I've got to be honest, I've never used different profiles ever, Sam, but I feel like you probably have. But for me,
I
the
have
place
about a dozen. So,
but for me, the place that I live is in the scene collection, because you can actually create all kinds of different scene collections, and these can be for different shows, for different podcasts, for different projects. I mean, there's literally one here that says day job. This doesn't actually include my real day job stuff, but I do have that on my other version of OBS. So we can sort of come in, we can create new scene collections, we can duplicate these, we can rename them, we can export them and import them too. And I guess I'm probably going to build something out in this portable version, and I might even see if I can export it and bring it into my normal version. But essentially, that's what we've got here. Talk to us, Sam, a little bit about scenes and sources. What do people need to know about this if they're a beginner?
right. So your scenes are basically a collection of sources. So everything that is on your screen, that is the scene, and it is made up of individual sources. So your sources are all of the different elements that are audio, visual, filters, and images and things like that. Text, anything that you could want is a source. So, right now you've got, John has like a screen capture going. You've got me as a video inside a filter, which is a mask. And then John himself, which has like a chroma key happening to it. So that's all of that. We could also put some text up here, could throw some sounds in the background, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. All right, so what I'm going to do, and this might get a little weird, and this is a tip that I didn't know until Said told me about this, but you can literally grab your images, and I'm curious if I can actually do multiple ones. I'm going to try this. I don't know how well it'll work, but we'll give it a go. I believe I can just drag and drop these into my sources, and it'll bring them all in. It'll give them sort of weird file names, so I'd probably need to go in and make sense of that. But I guess the other way of doing that would be to go to add a new source, go to image, give it a name, go and browse for it on your computer. So, I mean, I don't really need to do that for this one right now. But again, I brought in a whole lot of different stuff, and I guess the thing that is probably, with the exception of me, everything else is actually looking roughly in the right place. So I guess what we'll do is we'll just go through some of these things, and I do have another sort of more cobbled together version of this, so we might even go back to that in a second, but I just wanted to show you how we could do that conceptually. So essentially I've got all these different things, and if I toggle them on and off, we can see what that is. So I'm gonna right click and just rename some of these things as we go, or we can do F2. So I'll say rounded border. In fact, I'll call it rounded, if I can type, neon border. Okay, this is actually pretty self-explanatory, although it looks like I've got a few different things in there as well, but I'm going to rename this. And again, I should use the keyboard shortcuts, but I've got to remember what they are. F2, OBS Obsessed logo. This is literally just a stand-in for me, but I think we'll just call that one John. That's fine. This is the one that actually isn't sort of exported as that 1920, because I kind of wanted to move myself around a little bit. So we've got this comment bar, and I kind of actually decided not to use this in the end, but I think I'll leave that there for the moment. And we've got the background as well. So it's not going to be super obvious what the background and the top are unless I bring in a color source. So let me do that. I'm going to create a new color source. Color source is literally what it sounds like. It's it's just a color, and I could go in and actually change that color if I wanted to. I can do that with hex codes, HSV values, RGB. Can even adjust the alpha if I wanted to make it different. But in this case, I really just want to move this down the list. And that's the other thing that's important to keep in mind, is that these things will be layered in the order that they appear, so things on top. So I probably really want my OBS Obsessed logo at the very top, because it kind of wants to be on top of everything else. But essentially, if we bring this down, this is actually the background. So this was that cutout shape. So this is this little bit of black here, and you can barely sort of see it there, but it is there when I kind of wanted it to be there. The other thing too is the top area, which I think is actually a combination of some of these other assets. Effects. Okay, so in this case, I sort of must have exported this at some point as a complete overlay in itself. And I don't know that I really want to use that. I think I will get rid of that one at the moment. So what we can do, and Said writes, I like creating transparent rectangles and positioning elements in them, so when added to OBS, everything shows up exactly where it's intended to be. Yeah, and I must admit, I'm a big fan of actually going into, right-clicking on something, going into Edit Transform, editing the transform, and actually giving it a specific area that I want it to be positioned in. So at the moment, what are we saying? This is 1920. I might even try 800. No, that's 500 maybe, 400. And we can actually reposition this. And I guess this kind of comes back to me being a bit of a control freak, that if I were in Affinity Designer, a lot of these things, we actually have a transform panel down the bottom, which is directly behind me, so you can't even see it here. But I can sort of punch in numbers, and I can get really granular in that approach as well. Said writes too that I recently learnt about control up and control down to move sources up and down in the source list. That's another great tip that I didn't know about. So thank you for that. All right. So essentially what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of this comment bar thing. I don't really want that right now. I probably want to reposition this stand-in for my camera. And again, let me just do that. I could literally just drag that down, but I think I'm gonna try and work with the numbers a little bit. All right, cool. So again, depending on how we want to do this, at the moment I'm kind of above some of these other objects, so the backgrounds and the top. So if I wanted to make sure that, and I know that's hard to see because I'm literally wearing black in this photo. I'm not really sure why I did that, but it is what it is. So if I bring that on, for example, we can see that that's appearing there. So, it could be that, this is basically what I'm after. And again, I probably would change this color source. And again, I don't know if I actually am committed to the black. I might even try a dark gray. And we can see that we've got these elements here. Obviously, I guess the other thing that I need to acknowledge is I am someone who works in front of a green screen 24/7. So I kind of have the ability to play with things in front of me and behind me in a way that you may not. And there's no problem with that. You just need to keep that in mind, that a lot of things you'll be adding will essentially be on top rather than behind you. And I feel like I've been talking for a million years, Sam. So do you have any sort of tips in terms of working with different scenes and sources and keeping things organized? Because I guess that's the thing I haven't done here, is I haven't sort of organized these in any meaningful sense just yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually something that I sit down with before I even open up OBS, right? Like figure out what the scenes are that I want to create and then go from there. If you have, a bunch of different scene needs that you're going to have, like you want things to move around, like your camera is going to go from full screen to picture in a picture or from left side to right side. Early on, you need to decide whether or not you're doing that by scenes or by something like the Move plugin. And if you're doing it by scenes, set up your first scene, set up all of the elements you want, and then duplicate that scene. Don't try and add things into it later, because you'll never get it in the right place.
And I feel like you're stealing my thunder a little bit, but let's get into it. So I guess the other thing too, like I'm gonna rename this scene, and I'll call this John host. I don't know. We could call it whatever we like, but I guess the other thing, and some of these things won't be things that we'll build out today, but I probably want to have another scene. I personally like to have a scene that's just called blank. And what I do is that once I'm ready to go live, I hit the start streaming button. I wait until it tells me that I'm actually live, and then I go to what essentially is an intro scene, but it's often an intro scene that actually has a video that's set up to play when that scene gets access. And again, I haven't had the time to build one out here for this purpose, but essentially what I would do would start on blank. In fact, let me put some text in here just to show you that this is indeed the intro scene text. And I know I should mention too, I know Saeed has very specific conventions when it comes to naming his scenes and sources, and he uses different colored emojis to differentiate them from the list. But anyway, I'm just going to write intro scene. So normally what would happen was I'd click the start streaming button, which is literally behind my head, so you'll have to take my word for it. We'd go from the blank. Once I know we're actually live, I'd go here and wait for that to play out. Then I'd go to my host scene. But imagine, maybe I want to actually do some screen sharing, for example. And I don't really have anything to share with you today. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to bring in an image of a screen from somewhere. And I don't really know where this is, so I might need to get Sam to speak for a second. But essentially...
Oh, sure. That's good, because I was going to say a second ago that like when you're doing that workflow, that's a great time to use the advanced scene switcher tool, which we talked about a few live streams ago, and you can find that in our archive, but that will automate that process. So all you have to do is hit that start stream button. It'll automatically go to blank, wait 5 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever you set it to, go to intro, wait for that video to play all the way through. And when that video is completely done, it'll go to the John host scene, and then you have manual control at that point. Hopefully that was enough of me talking.
Awesome. Yes. And that is something we've covered on the show in the past, and I haven't actually played with it, if I'm being completely honest, but what I'm going to do, this is actually just a video thumbnail, but I'm just going to pretend it's a screen share for today's purposes. So again, I'm going to see if I can use this great tip from Saeed. So control down will bring that down in the list, which is awesome. So here, and again, you'll see what happens here is that when I bring it in, it's on top of everything. I want it underneath the OBS logo, the OBS Obsessed logo. I want it underneath there, but I also want it underneath the background. And it could be that maybe I want to sort of change the dimensions of this. In this case, I kind of actually want it underneath the John screen share as well. And what I'm going to do, now that I've got this here, and I know this might seem kind of ridiculous right now, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually right-click on that John host scene. I'm going to duplicate it. It's going to ask me for a name. I'll say John SS, which is a screen share. And if I go back in here, and this is the point at which I'll go, okay, I don't really want the screen share here where I'm just presenting, so we can get rid of that. And then I can go back to this screen, and again, there's two versions of me on screen, which is kind of confusing, but just take my word for this. But what I kind of want to do is when I'm screen sharing, and I might need to sort of click in here. I guess the other thing to note too, down here, when you click on anything, you'll see that whatever's got focus will actually, the name will appear over here. So right now it's background, and now it's me. So what I probably want to do when I'm screen sharing is I kind of want to bring myself to the right-hand side. I might even want to make myself smaller. And I can just drag that in. But the other thing that I thought might be good actually is when I'm screen sharing like this, I might even want to take myself out of that background. So I'm just going to move myself up above that background. So again, I'll do that control up. And I'll do that a couple of times. And you'll see that I've actually broken that round section. So we're going to talk about plugins in a second, but I do have this thing called the Move plugin. And I guess to give you a sense of this, when I press this button, I've got all these different things, and this is actually the same scene. So I can press a button like this, or I can press a button like this, or I can make Sam featured, or Sam full screen, or me full screen. And these are actually all in the one scene. I'm just using some filters from the Move plugin to make that happen. And it's a really elegant way of doing it. But the other thing that's really cool about this is it also works as a transition type. So if I, and I'll have to actually come in here and probably add this. So again, I appreciate I'm going to resize this just for a second to give you a sense of what this looks like because it appears behind me. But essentially, if I go to the scenes transitions, and if you don't see that, just find it from the docs, scenes transitions, and make sure that's on. We can actually reposition that one. In fact, that's what I'll do. I'm going to move this over here temporarily. So we've got our scene transition. I want to add a new scene transition, and I want this one to be move. And I'll just call it move because that's fine by me. There's a whole bunch of options here. I'm not even going to worry about them. I'm just going to say it's fine. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually make my scene transition fade here. But when I'm moving between these two, I'm going to right click and I'm going to go transition override move. And transition override move there as well. And now we go blank, we go intro, we come here, I'm talking on screen, then I want to go to my screen share, and you'll see that it moves me and it repositions me. So it moves me physically within that frame, but it also changes the order. So it's put me on top of everything else, so I can do that in that way. And this, again, this is a free plugin. You saw how easy that was to do. And all you really need to think about is if you want something to be animated or something to move between scenes, just make sure they're in both of them, because that'll give you the best control over how that all looks. Although now I'm sort of conscious of the fact there are 3 versions of me on this scene. I'm feeling self-conscious about that. So I'll go back to this one here, Sam. But and again, I pressed the wrong button. There we go. Try that one on for size as well. So Saeed, who's much more organized than probably I am, says, have a dedicated folder for all the assets in your scene collection and name them properly. Your future self will definitely thank you. I guess the other thing too that maybe we haven't touched upon, Sam, and I might let you take this one, grouping things and or sort of working with nested scenes. So again, I might do the screen share and I'll talk about this a little bit while we do it. So if you decide that there are certain things that you think should always be together, often a really good way of doing that is selecting them. I'm just holding down the control key here, and I can right click and I can go group selected items, and that'll create a new group. And the great thing about the groups is that you can sort of toggle their visibility as one item. So I could turn that on or off. So it could be that maybe there are scenes where I don't particularly want that, or again, if I've grouped them, I don't even need to worry too much about a scene as such. But I guess the other thing that is possible too is the use of nested scenes. One of these days I'm gonna press the right button and that'll be much more elegant, but not today. But talk to us about nested scenes.
Yeah, so so earlier, we were saying how if you want something that's going to be in every scene, just make sure to duplicate that scene. But if you're not talking about duplicating everything that's in the scene, you just want like 1 or 2 or 3 individual things that happen in every single scene. And generally I use this for like stream alerts and overlays of that nature, like things a lot of gamers tend to use. You'll create an overlay scene and then nest that within the other scenes, which basically means you lay out your scene and then you go into another scene, your original scene, you add source, but your source is that scene. And it'll show up, wherever you have it layered in the scene. So in my situation, it would always going to be the top layer because it is an overlay source. So it's going to have, it actually has about 30 different overlays that are typically completely transparent until something triggers it, and then it shows up from whatever service it's showing up. So it will then show up at the top of the the stack of things. I also tend to put my main microphone in that scene so that I don't accidentally build out a scene and forget to put my microphone in it, because that's just something that I've done. So I know if my overlay scene is nested, I also have sound in it. But yeah, there's lots of different reasons you may want a nested scene that don't necessarily have to be temporary overlays. It could be a bunch of other things. And it doesn't have to be something that you need in every single scene. Like you may just want, you know, a scene that you've used as a smaller version of itself, you know, that you're then pointing out to and talking about within a bigger scene, if you will. So there's a lot of different possible uses for it, but I think nested scenes are definitely something to learn and use.
And I guess hearing you speak about that just then, like I'm thinking the nested scene is often a great way of sort of having a picture-in-picture experience that, you know, maybe you've just watched something and maybe you're now on camera talking about it and it's just beside you while you're unpacking the thing. I don't know why I'm bringing up that example because I think everyone knows that I think reaction videos are like the lowest form of culture, but that in and of itself is sort of beside the point. But I guess... and Said's getting a bit geeky, so again, we love this. He writes, getting a bit geeky, I use the Move plugin inside a nested scene and then add that scene whenever I need it. The animations always work consistently because they're tied to the nested scene. So again, I know this is... I think that makes sense. Yeah, I get it, Said.
Yeah,
that's good. And I guess, you know, the thing is, the great thing about nested scenes is that you can sort of bring them in and out as you want, and you can sort of treat that part of your show as its own distinct thing. So if we had, and I guess just to be really clear, for this show, I'm in my own scene, Sam's in his own scene, and we bring those two scenes into what I call the tabs and overlays scene. So that we're essentially two different scenes in OBS, and again, with the help of that Move plugin, I can sort of do things like this and move us around and have one person in front of the other person or whatever. So there are all kinds of options there. I guess if we think about maybe what kind of plugins you might want to bring into your show, and again, this will depend on what your show is, who it's for, and how you anticipate working. Because I guess obviously on this show, we have I have a co-host, so we bring in Sam, and traditionally we've done that with Video Ninja. Right now we're doing it with ping.gg, but essentially that's a piece of software that lets Sam and I log into it, and I can grab a browser source with his camera and audio and just throw that into OBS really easily. Video is the same sort of thing. It's a free option. We had some quality issues, and I don't think that was necessarily a reflection of the tool so much as Sam's internet, if I can be that honest. But we're making it work. So if anyone wants to sponsor Sam's internet, please get in touch with him because we'd all love that. But you know, so if you are bringing in other people, that's something that doesn't really happen terribly natively into OBS. So you'll need to think about that. Chat comments are a thing that, you know, you might want to think about bringing into OBS, especially for a show. And again, the tool that we use is also by Steve, who does Video Ninja. It's called Social Stream Ninja. And it lets me click on things like this, and you'll see that Said's comment appears at the bottom of the screen. He's saying, example, a lower third in as a nested scene with multiple animated sources. Then you can add it to the main scenes. Absolutely, yes. And I should say, I don't think... yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, this is exactly the kind of thing that would be in my overlay scene, because if I decide that I want this comment on and I'm like, you know, it's you and me, but we decide, oh, we can show you that exact thing, and I want the comment to still be there and in the same place. It's a nested scene. I don't have to worry about it leaving and going off into some weird, you know, situation.
Absolutely. And I must admit, I don't think that's how I've set it up for this show, but there's no reason why you couldn't do that as a nested scene. Yeah. And, you know, it's one of those things, just create a new scene collection and play around with the nested scenes. You'll be amazed at how useful they can be. But I guess the other thing too, I'm going to sort of bring over the version of this that I was playing with during the week. So let me press this magical button. So this is actually just another scene collection in my scene, and this is the one I was playing with. And again, I've only got the single scene here, but the thing that I was sort of doing over here was working with the Ninja Chat. And because the Ninja Chat is connected everywhere to the same thing, I think if I press it over here, it'll pop up down the bottom, but it'll also pop up over here, which might be a little bit annoying. But I just wanted to call out This gradient is something that I designed in Affinity Designer, so I knew what the hex codes were. I knew where the transition was, and essentially what I've done is with this Ninja Chat browser, I've essentially just added that as a background to the CSS overlay. And it's interesting. Traditionally, what I would have done was I would have actually had this be 1920 by 1080, but in this case, I've really restricted it just to the bottom part of the screen because I now have that as an overlay there. So now I've kind of got a little bit of color involved in there. And the great thing about that, and I'll press this back on in a second, I can sort of toggle the visibility of that on and off. And that way, when I'm ready to go to chat, I can bring that on, and I can sort of it'll have that gradient color in the backgrounds, but I can sort of toggle that on and off when I need it. So again, thinking in terms, and I realize I feel like we're always talking to two different audiences. We've got newbies and we've got super advanced people, and sometimes we meet in the middle, but not very often. And I realize that the idea of adding CSS is probably a little daunting to some people, but it is incredibly powerful. And I guess the thing is, even if you can't do that personally, there are people out there that could probably help you with that. In fact, Saeed could probably help you with that potentially, so you can get in touch with him. But yeah, it's just little things to keep coming back to how you want to design it, how it looks and feels, but also how it actually acts. And we love plugins. We've done entire shows on OBS plugins, and there are all kinds of cool things, a lot of cool free things that you could do there as well. And I guess the other thing too that we haven't even touched on too much is the Atom vertical plugin is amazing, and there's no reason why you couldn't create vertical assets and then sort of link those to your horizontal scenes if you really wanted to do either a vertical and horizontal stream, or even a video, sort of a video recording of both of those, or one of those. So, the possibilities are endless. And, we've been talking for a really long time, Sam. So as we begin to wrap up, where can people go to learn more about you, watch your content, all that good fun stuff?
Yeah, you can head over to samproof.tv. You'll find all of my social links at the top left, though I may have to change a few of those in the coming days. And if you didn't see enough cats today, head over to cuteavalanche.com and enjoy our Catmas interactive experience.
Absolutely. And if you want to catch up with me, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I got the podcast, a whole bunch of articles and social links at the bottom of those pages. Incidentally, even these overlays with the website images and the QR codes, they're just images with some transparency built into them. So, and you can do that on my software, not just OBS. So, whatever you're working on, you can do it that way. Saeed has an unpopular opinion. He uses ChatGPT for some quick CSS. That hurts my soul on all kinds of levels, but not least of which being a web designer, developer myself. But anyway, you do you. Have a great week, everybody. We'll be back at roughly the same time next week. And, whether you're here for the OBS stuff or not, I hope you'll join us. I think next week we're talking about adding some festive flourishes to your streams. So I hope you'll join us then as well. So have a great week, have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon.